One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. Not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. And this is episode number 209, if you're scoring at home. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are a organization that's been around for 42 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bringing the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, so I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments under the video. All of these simple actions help convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets the show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. Yes, it's still demonetized. So if you want to help support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of this program from all over the world who help bring it to everyone every single week. And we also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. We have a very big show today, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? Sterling Burnett, Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center for Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. Linnea Lueken, Senior Fellow for Energy and Environmental Policy at Heartland. And we have producers Andy Singer and Silas Centurion Pearson behind the scenes producing the show. And joining us today is our regular guest. We're so happy to have her back again, is Lois Perry. She is the director of Heartland UK Europe, and she's been fighting the madness of net zero across the pond better than anybody else. Welcome back to the show, Lois.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get started, and we do like to keep this show pretty light and love to have a lot of fun on this program, but there is a tragedy and a horrible crime in the UK that I think we need to address, and that's the murder of Anne Widdecombe. Anne was a giant and conservative with a small c politics in the UK. She was a close friend of Lois, and she attended the opening reception, actually, of Heartland UK Europe about a year and a half ago. Lois, I know you've been on many programs this week talking about Anne as the case has proceeded, and I want to give you a chance at the top of this show to do so again.
I really, really appreciate that. I'd just like to qualify. I was professionally close to Anne, but to say I was a close friend, I don't want to over-egg it. You know what I mean? I don't want people to think that I'm saying more than, but professionally, she was a big supporter of us, of me personally, and what we're trying to achieve. In fact, there's no greater embodiment of what we're doing in what you're doing, what we're doing, and what I'm doing in the UK and Europe with the Heartland than Anne Widdecombe. She was a passionate advocate of free speech. She thought net zero was a load of old nonsense, which of course we know it is. And she said that no one has a right to not be offended. She was quite an extraordinary woman. She was a devout Roman Catholic her entire life, famously never married, and she was butchered. She was butchered in the last, I think it's in the last 7 to 10 days, by a left-wing, allegedly, I don't want to say anything that will prejudice the case, allegedly by an extreme left-wing fanatic who was found with extreme communist and Marxist literature in his home, and she was targeted and she was bludgeoned to death in her kitchen while she was eating lunch 21 times over the head with a hammer. This is the first example that we know of left-wing extremism in the United Kingdom. It is now known that the alleged murderer of Anne also had a shrine to my good friend and good friend of us, Heartland,
Yes.
Mr. Nigel Farage. He had a hate shrine to Nigel in his home. So I've had my security increased at here. Obviously, Nigel's security was through the roof anyway, but he's on much more high alert than he was already, which was it's almost impossible to imagine it being anymore. But yeah, it's a very, 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 very sad day, sad time for free speech in this country. But I just wanted all your viewers to know that she was a big supporter of us, and she came to our launch event in London and she had the best time. In fact, she was treated like a queen. She was holding court at the party with all these gay guys who were totally obsessed with her, bringing a glass of champagne after glass of champagne. I mean, she was pretty squiffy by the end of it. And but she, as I say, she was a wonderful woman, and rest in peace.
Yeah, and I do apologize for overstating. I didn't mean to do that, overstating your relationship.
No, not at all. I just don't want anyone that knows me and knows Anne to see it and think, well, hang on a minute, Lois is overselling. It's just me being English. Don't worry.
I meant to be clear that that's completely on me. We actually we hadn't really discussed whether we were going to bring up Anne before the start of the show. It just literally happened right before we went live.
She was a close colleague and big supporter. Yeah.
Yes, I heard you say on Dan Wooten's show that she met your mother, and your mother was.
Oh yeah, she did.
That's why I thought you were so close.
Yeah, well, I just have my entire extended family with me all the time. No, my mum desperately wanted to meet Nigel, so I made sure she was at the party.
Oh, that's great.
And he actually managed Mummy pretty well. And if you can manage my mother, you can run the country, because it is no mean feat. I can't manage Mummy.
Yep, being prime minister is easy duty after that, I guess.
Honestly, it's a walk in the park.
All right. Well, our condolences to everybody who knew, loved, and worked with Anne Widdecombe, and may justice come to her killer, and justice be done.
I'm particularly concerned about this murder because it has a lot of political overtones, which are yet to be sorted out. But, throughout the last decade or more, climate skeptics have been vilified. They have been suggested that they are the scum of the earth, that they should be eliminated. I've had threats made against me. A couple of years ago, I was doxxed, and my home address and interior photos and things like that were published based on, stuff that came out of Zillow and things like that. And it's very concerning to me. We had down at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, where Dr. John Christie studies, and Roy Spencer. Their office was shot at, and a bullet hole was through John Christie's office. This kind of stuff is frightening. This kind of stuff makes me worry, and I'm sure it makes all of you worry too. I've increased my security. I've got cameras all over the place. And for any of you listening that might want to think about visiting me with some sort of nefarious intent, I want you to know I practice the Second Amendment every day. So, yeah, it's very, very troublesome that this murder happened of a prominent conservative and climate skeptic.
Yeah, indeed.
We don't have a Second Amendment. So, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the world we live in. This is the world we live in, where disagreeing with the left can sometimes be a matter of life and death, and it should not be that way.
No.
But okay. Well, as I said at the top, part of the trademark of this show is that we like to keep things light and have some fun. And we're going to endeavor to do that because I think this show is important and it's good to have it in that spirit. Part of that spirit is what we call the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you, Bill Nye. I think all those flames were just exclusively over Canada, apparently. So on that globe. And by the way, the title of this show is Blame Canada. We're just having a little bit of cheeky fun. And I am wearing my Toronto Blue Jays shirt that I got when I visited. There you go. When I visited what they used to call Sky Dome a few years back on a baseball trip. So love Canada. We love our Canadian friends who watch the show every week. So just take it in that spirit. But we are going to talk about these Canadian fires. We touched on it a little bit last week when we had John Robson, who is Canadian, on our show last week. But first, I want to look at Andy or Silas, if you could play that video that we had. This is some pretty cool video from NASA, and it shows the smoke from the wildfires in Canada coming down into the United States from July 14th to July 20th. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's cool to look at. It's not great for the air quality, temporarily made pretty bad in places like Chicago, Chicagoland, where I live, and other places. Most of Michigan is getting pretty messed up. And there is also, as we started off there, with an interactive map from NASA that shows the status of the fires as of actually this morning. But no less than Anthony Watts has actually written a good piece on this today. It was actually published yesterday in the American Thinker. I'm going to read a little bit from it. So, and Anthony, get ready to comment because then you'll be up. Anthony starts off. Every summer seems to follow the same predictable media script. Wildfires ignite somewhere in North America. Smoke drifts hundreds or even thousands of miles. Air quality alerts are issued. Television stations fill the screen with hazy skylines. Then, before investigators have even determined how the fires started, headlines begin linking the smoke to climate change. This year has been no different. As smoke from Canadian wildfires spread across part of the Midwest and Northeast, much of the news coverage quickly shifted from reporting on the fires to treating them as evidence of a worsening climate crisis. Yet one crucial fact was often left out. Many of the fires responsible for the smoke were ignited by lightning, a natural cause that has existed for as long as forests have. Lightning is not new. Smoke carried by prevailing winds is not new. What is new is the growing tendency to treat every smoky sky as proof of climate change. That illogical leap simply is not supported by the evidence. Okay, Anthony, we're going to throw it to you here. I know you have some charts that you like to use to support that statement, and we have them ready to go. So take it away.
Well, like I said, it's predictable. The media lately has become lazy and sloppy. And when I say lately, I'm talking about the last 2 decades. Seriously, they just don't drill beyond the headline anymore. They don't look at anything deeply. And if they had bothered to look at some data, because, data speaks far louder than opinion, you would find that fires in America so far, in the Americas, including Canada and so forth, are the lowest so far, in over a decade. Now, that's got to tell you something. Now, you compare that to the media and their caterwauling about, climate change. Well, if climate change was making fires worse, wouldn't we have worse fires by now in terms of the data for the Americas? You'd think that. And then it's not just the Americas, it's everywhere else. Look at this. This chart shows the deviation from the norm for 2026 for all continents. Every one of them is down. And again, 1 year is not, the whole story. But again, if you look at the whole picture that the media is pushing, they are eliminating this inconvenient data point. But it's not just this year. It goes back decades, centuries. Look at this. This is published in the Royal Society. This graph is part of a peer-reviewed paper. And it looks at all of the different wildfire scars in North America, particularly Western North America. And they've been able to show that there was much bigger fires. I mean, look at the one in 1748. much, much bigger fires. And then we got into the era of fire suppression, the U.S. Forest Service and so forth and so on, water tanker bombers, that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, the number of fires is less. Where's the crisis, you climate nut jobs? It isn't there.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's I've heard people I watch a lot or read a lot of Twitter and X, for better for worse, most of it for good, because I'm following Chris Martz. Chris Martz, our friend who has great stuff on Twitter all the time, and also Steve Malloy and others. But people say, I grew up in Chicagoland all my life. I never remember ever seeing some sort of, air quality alert when I was a kid outside playing in the summertime. And well, I can't vouch for that. I didn't live in Chicago in my young years, but these things are not, as Anthony just pointed out, they're not all that uncommon, but on the whole, things are actually better now than they were just a couple of decades ago.
Indeed.
All right. So
a lot better than they were 100 years ago.
Sure.
And even better still than they were 300 years ago, when 200 and 300 years ago, when large parts of the Midwest went aflame as Western expansion commenced.
Yeah. I mean, well, one thing we talk about on this program a lot is the fact that, yes, the Earth is actually warmer today than it was 150 years ago. But it does not follow that because the Earth is warmer, wildfires are getting worse. In fact, as Anthony just showed, despite the world warming, wildfires are on every continent on Earth that has trees, so don't include Antarctica. That forest fires are actually down overall, and the acreage burned is down. So, are you going to believe the lying media, or are you going to believe actual data that you get on this program?
Oh, God forbid that anyone actually looks at the data. I mean, I remember the wildfires a couple of years ago across Europe, and the amount of coverage about climate change and global warming and all of this stuff. And then very, very, very quietly, very, very small amount of column inches. About 6 weeks later, it said it was it was not arson. It was the fires were deliberately set off. Yeah. They were deliberately set off, and people were actually charged and convicted. But the narrative was such that don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, and people still talk about it.
I saw an appalling report just yesterday that some of these fires have been set by just vile, evil people, dousing cats and dogs in gasoline and setting them aflame as they ran off.
You always have to think as well. Yeah, absolutely. And you always have to think, who benefits from these fires? It's the people that are pushing this agenda. I'm not making accusations, of course not, but I was going to say wildfire accusations, but it is interesting, isn't it, that whenever certain narrative needs to be pushed, certain things seem to happen spontaneously due to climate change. I'm not going to go down any rabbit holes, though, Jim. Don't worry, not today, anyway.
That would be so unlike you. You would never do something like that.
Of course, yeah. You know me.
Yeah. Well, actually, what Silas or Andy put up on this screen there is a story that was pretty disturbing about how sick people are. That wildfire investigators discovered cats used to spread flames with fuel-soaked rags tied to their tails, and of course, the cats do not survive the suicide mission of spreading wildfires. It reminds me of
It's atrocious.
It's atrocious. But yeah, a lot of these wildfires are set by arsonists, and almost inevitably, you discover that the arsonist is somebody from the environmental left who is, frankly, wanting to prove that climate change is going to destroy the planet and cause more wildfires and all that stuff. And just like there isn't enough racism in the United States for the people in the racism grievance business, that they have to employ the Southern Poverty Law Center to invent racist incidents so that they have their existence. The same thing happens on occasion on the environmental left. And
I wish that I hope they catch these people that did this it wasn't just cats. I think they did it a couple of times to dogs as well. I hope that if they catch these people, they then put them in a room with about 30 or 40 rabid animal rights advocates with pointy sticks and give them 15
very pointy sticks.
Yeah, or heavy clubs, and let them have a go for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, so I definitely that's terrible. Arson has always been one of the leading causes of wildfires in the United States, and I guess Canada as well, I would guess. Or even accidental arson, just leaving your campfire unsmothered when you're out hiking or whatever. I think this situation with, intentional explosive devices to start forest fires, or starting a fire outside of a nice neighborhood on purpose, like what happened at the Palisades. And that guy ended up getting arrested, or this like a completely absurd cats and dogs thing is part of the, the increase, let's say, in the number of people who are crazy running around without being institutionalized. Which I do think is increasing. You can just see it in pretty much any major city. But with regards to the idea that these wildfires are totally new, I really think that this is a lot like other weather phenomena in the world, in that it's more of a media coverage phenomenon. Now, this one in particular is bad. I don't know for sure if it's been this bad in the era of like recorded, weather conditions in North America. This particular fire and the particular wind conditions that are bringing it directly into people's neighborhoods and stuff across the northeastern United States. I think that is novel in memory, I think. However, the idea that there weren't smoky days in like recent years, even, I think really, I mean, when I was a kid, I definitely remember that there were days where you could smell smoke on the air, and you kind of wonder to yourself, is this because they're burning the park again? Because where I grew up in Illinois, in the North Chicago suburbs, they would burn the prairie every once in a while, and you would smell it, or they'd burn the forest preserve. And that's important to do. And that's one of the things that many of our federal preserves don't do enough of, which is controlled burns in order to prevent major fuel buildup.
Mm-hmm.
But you would wonder, oh, is that an accidental thing, or is someone's house on fire, or what? But I think when you're young or when you're a kid, I think most of the time you kind of just dismiss it. But now that we're all clued into the news cycle 24/7, I think it sticks in your memory more when it's covered in the news continuously, like frantically, versus when you're a kid, there's a fire or something. The air is a little bit smoky when you go out to do your fishing or your skateboarding or whatever you're doing. You think, I wonder what's on fire. And then it just passes through your brain. And maybe you go home and your mom says, oh, did you on the news, it says that there's a forest fire or whatever. And you're like, okay, whatever. And you just move on. I think that that's part of this because obviously the data shows that big fires have happened in the past in all of these locations. So yeah, I think this is another one of those things where it's a media coverage issue. We never, until the age of social media especially, we never had such media coverage where you have the double effect of the 24/7 media cycle, and now with global internet, the global internet news cycle, which is continuous for every little country on the planet, every remote spot on the planet that has a flood with a mudslide or any other kind of catastrophe, a fire, will show up the second that it makes local news, thousands and thousands of miles
I
away.
agree. And I think, but it's specifically, Linnea, I don't know if you agree with me. Sorry, but just I think that when it suits an extreme left agenda, then suddenly it's massive. So going back to what you were saying about how certain things are covered enormously and continuously and relentlessly, but not others. Having just got back from 10 days in Israel, I don't think you can think of any better example in the world. That's how the media treats Israel in terms of when they are, their military excursions and the things that they're doing to keep their country safe, etc., compared to almost every other country in the world. I mean, I said to my daughter earlier, she was talking about Israel, and I said, yeah, you're right. There are mistakes that have been made, but obviously you're really angry about the Sudan as well. And she went, what? And I said, well, all the Christians being murdered in the Sudan, hundreds of thousands. It's really, really terrible. And she didn't know about it. And that's not because, and she's quite informed, my little stick. She really is. But when you have relentless coverage of one particular thing, because it suits an agenda and nothing on the other side, I just thought that was a good example of what you were saying.
One of the worst things that came out of this smoke thing is that a couple of baseball games were delayed. So I wasn't happy about that. But I should point out, this happened again. This happened a couple of years ago. We had smoke from Wildfire visit the Northeast. And as climate realism stories, we did a few of them, point out smoke from Canadian wildfires were common in the past. In history, there's history books that write about the yellow days in New England with the smoke from wildfires. And, the Canadian, their equivalent of the Forest Service has said, look, we've had a large buildup of timber. We've had some good growing seasons. So when wildfires occur, they're bad. I will say this, Linnea talked about the need for controlled burns. There's another way to manage fuel load in forest that we've abandoned, and that's logging. I don't want to burn valuable timber. I want to log valuable timber. And it also leaves less fuel around, and it also suppresses bug transmission, pest transmission from tree to tree. I say, the forest fires were lower in the 80s, and logging 12 million board feet down to 1 million board feet now in national forest. Well, fires have started to come back because they've changed the philosophy that logging is a bad thing, despite the fact that the Forest Service is in the agriculture department. It was supposed to be a resource, a renewable resource used for the good of the nation, not allowed to burn willy-nilly. That's why they started Only You Can Prevent Forest Fires campaign.
Yeah, Sterling, when I was talking about, controlled burn of forests, I wasn't so much talking about like making a big hot fire that would damage the trees, kind of just the thing that they do to clear out the underbrush with a low intensity fire to make it nice and comfy for quail and other things,
I understand. I love quail, but I do know that when the government gets involved in, they do that on farms, right? On plantations. They do that and they manage it very well. But I've noted over the past decade and a half, often when the government gets into the controlled burn business, it gets out of control and starts destroying homes and communities because they chose the wrong wind day or they didn't have enough suppression equipment on hand. So if the governments do it, I'm automatically skeptical.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
Never pays off. All right. Well, we can move on, but as Charles Rotter watching us today and in the stream left a comment that growing up in Southern California, this was basically called summer. I lived in Southern California for 5 years, and you would literally drive by a highway and see the flames like about 10 yards off the road as you're driving down the 10 freeway or something. So it's like, although it's unusual to see it in the upper Midwest, if you lived in Southern California for any period of time, it was called summer. It was fire burning season. The skies always smelled and looked smoky. It's like, and frankly, they didn't like close down schools or tell you shouldn't be out skateboarding or anything. People moved on with their life. But, if something happens to the northeastern United States, where all the important people live, we have to stop everything.
Our friend Steve Malloy pointed out, despite all this smoke and all the health warnings, there has not been an increase in emergency room visits for cardiopulmonary or breathing problems. All this smoke, it's terrible for our health. No increase in emergency room visits or hospitalizations or treatment.
Yeah. I want to bring to everybody's attention this graph I produced a couple of years ago, which is really telling about fire suppression and increasing fires. So I plotted The federal timber number of acres harvested in the millions, that's the blue line. And then the number of acres burned, that's the red line. And this is from actual data. And the interesting thing is that once the spotted owl was listed as endangered, the amount of acres of harvested timber plummeted and stayed low. Meanwhile, because we have a cumulative fuel load going on in these federal lands, we're getting more and more bigger fires because there's more fuel available, because there's no timber harvesting going on. It's really simple. Of course, you know, environmentalists don't want to look at this because from their perspective, the spotted owl, protecting that environment and so forth, is far more important than whether or not it burns. And that's the sad part about this. You know what I need? I need myself a t-shirt that says data rules, opinion rules. That's what I need.
They, you know, as they reduced logging, they also ripped out thousands of miles of forest roads or closed them. Sometimes they destroyed them, but other times they just closed them. They put something across it. They dug ditches so you couldn't get around it. Well, that did prevent people from going in the forest and doing things, but it also prevented firefighters from getting back to forest fires before they reached communities.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everyone for that very good discussion on the Canadian wildfires. I hope that the prevailing winds continue to, I guess they lessen. It's less of a story today. So, but we wanted to make sure that we covered it. Let's go to our second item now. I've titled this "No Heat Pumps in UK." This comes, get ready, Lois. This is for you. This comes from the Telegraph via What's Up With That. Headline is, "Heat pump households face winter rationing threat. Energy suppliers could remotely turn down heating in people's homes under labor plans." I'll read a bit here. Heat pump households face winter warmth rationing as the drive to net zero raises increasing fears of blackouts. By the end of next year, electricity suppliers will be able to remotely turn down heat pump central heating to help Britain's energy system cope with high demand. Suppliers are expected to do so on the instructions of the Squango responsible for coordinating the grid, which is overseen by Ed Miliband's Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, something. I don't know how you're supposed to say that. Britain's electricity supply typically comes under most strain during winter cold snaps. The risk of blackouts is expected to become more extreme as net zero policies shift energy demand from gas to electricity and supply becomes more dependent on less reliable wind and solar generation. Under the Energy Secretary's proposed Smart Secure Electricity Systems scheme, licensed providers such as Octopus Energy and British Gas will be able to restrict heat pumps via the internet. There are more than 223,000 heat pumps installed in existing buildings across the country, according to the latest official statistics. Mr. Miliband has set a target for 450,000 heat pumps to be installed annually by 2030. And since April last year, everyone installed must be capable of being connected to the internet. The government assessment of the impact of the remote control plan, which is now under consultation, said energy suppliers, quote, will be able to remotely control significant amounts of electrical load through EV charge points, heat pumps, etc. DESNZ said the rationing system, officially referred to as load control, will help, quote, balance the grid during peak demand, making blackouts less likely. It is proposed that only heat pump households that agree will become part of the system and will be included. In return, they will be offered discount tariffs. Lois, yeah, sure. This is going to be a voluntary program, and there's no way that the government that makes you get heat pumps in the first place is going to abuse that power and turn down your heat without your consent, right?
Of course not. Why would a communist coup government use the powers that they have to control the populace? I mean, have you ever heard of that ever happening over the last 100 and so years since Karl Marx and Frederick Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto? No, said no one ever. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to begin. I've been warning about this in my first incarnation with my previous group that I had, which was an anti-net zero group. And now since I'm doing Heartland UK in Europe, I have been banging the drum for the fact that when you give the government control, they use it. And if the government, I mean, for example, my government at the moment has not been democratically elected. The MPs might have been, but the prime minister that we have at the moment staged a coup. He's even more left-wing than Keir Starmer, and has no mandate whatsoever from the British people. In fact, poll after poll after poll in British newspapers have said that the UK public wants a general election, which he won't give us at the moment. If you're going to be forced to have a heat pump and it'll be controlled, imagine if I had a heat pump. Imagine if I had a heat pump and then it could be remotely controlled by this government. I'd freeze to death. Every single tweet, I'd noticed that the notch had gone off. I'd noticed that I didn't have any hot water. Every time I appeared on your wonderful program, suddenly I probably wouldn't have any hot water. I'd have to start wearing wigs. I wouldn't be able to wash my hair. The whole thing is completely and utterly ridiculous, and totally unnecessary, because we have enough shale gas under our feet in the United Kingdom that could be safely fracked, despite what the Russian-funded propaganda. I wonder why Russia might have had an interest in us not wanting to frack and funded anti-fracking propaganda. Despite what they've said, we could safely frack, and we have it's estimated that the high-quality shale gas that we have in the Bowland Shale in the north of England could pay off our national debt. And keep us going for probably 50, 60 years without any need to import any energy whatsoever. So this whole thing is completely and utterly ideological and is disgusting. Ed Miliband, by the way, is actually our foreign secretary. Now we have an even more militant left-wing energy secretary. Now her name escapes me; it's unpronounceable. I don't. Oh God, that sounded bad. Actually, I don't know how to pronounce it. Apologies. That sounded bad. It's all pretty horrific, Jim.
Some people say that I rant sometimes on this show. That was, but I get completely out of control. You have this controlled rage that is so beautiful to watch.
Us girls, we're quite manipulative, so we're pretty good at the controlled rant. Yeah, I can do tears as well. No, I can't. That was a joke.
Amongst the politest rants I've ever.
True. It's the accent. It's the accent.
She's English, so.
But this whole thing, it's like they've been trying to push heat pumps on America too. They haven't really become mandatory, at least not in places where I've lived. Not even in Illinois are they mandatory. But this is the same pattern, guys. It's we are going to mandate certain technologies, and then we're going to control those technologies. But it's going to be on a volunteer basis only. So don't you worry. You can do what you like. We're not banning this. We're not banning that. We're just making it so expensive to actually have alternate technology used for heating and energy than what the government mandates, that it makes it impossible and economically infeasible. And now that actually leads into, there's going to be a second story on this that we're going to talk about, rolling blackouts. But when is there going to be a revolution against these sorts of things? Because, as you said, Lois, there's so much natural gas that can be fracked under the feet of every Briton alive today. I remember the late, great Jay Lair. He told me this 10, 15 years ago. This was before the fracking revolution. He said there are probably 250 to 300 years worth of oil and natural gas under the feet of every American in the United States. And that was before fracking. And so you could, the same must be true for the UK. You have a smaller population, but basically, the Industrial Revolution was started with coal mined in the UK.
Absolutely.
And so there's all sorts of energy under your feet.
Yeah, the problem we've got is that in America, when you own the ground under your house, yeah, we don't. That's the problem. So the king owns the ground under our houses, okay? And the king, and I'm a monarchist, but this is just a fact. The king is the duchy. I'm not sure which duchy it is actually. Well, previously, when he was the Prince of Wales, the Duchy of Cornwall was making hundreds and hundreds of millions a year from wind farms, offshore wind farms. So that flies in the face of fracking, doesn't it? And who would want to frack under their home if they weren't financially benefiting from it? So that's the problem that we've got in the UK. Yeah.
I will say, Jim, with regards to revolution, the phrase "no heat pump mandates or federal government control without representation" doesn't trip off the tongue quite as easily as "no taxation without representation." They have to come up with a better catchphrase.
Give me propane or give me death. How about that? Anthony, did you have something you wanted to say about this, or is it something else?
Well, actually, it wasn't about the heat pumps, but I did get a rare comment from Steve McIntyre on Climate Audit, who was speaking about our coverage of the Canadian wildfires. And he writes that your coverage of Canadian wildfires projects the American situation inappropriately. Arson is not relevant to the current situation, and there are tens of thousands of lightning strikes daily in the Canadian boreal forest, nor is it appropriate to use the term parkland. These fires are in remote northern forest. What was unusual at present fires was wind direction to the south. Fires occur every year. He's absolutely right about that they do occur every year. And one thing we did not mention, and it's an oversight on my part for not mentioning it, is that, yes, these fires were lightning started. And this is covered in detail in the article in the American Thinker, I believe, also on the current article that we have on climate realism and what's up with that coming up here shortly about this. Yes, lightning was the main cause of this. It was not arson. It was not other issues. And yes, because we are an American show, we are just a little bit more slanted towards things going on in the USA. But I appreciate your comment, Steve, and it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, it is actually quite an honor. I'm humbled at the fact that the great Steve McIntyre is watching this show live and is commenting live about it on X. And we address this. So, Stephen, thank you very much for finding this show worthy of your time. I appreciate it. Also, go Blue Jays all the time. I was pulling from the Win the World Series. Very disappointed they didn't win. So go Blue Jays.
I will say, I think we mentioned lightning strikes earlier. I don't think we implied that the wildfires in Canada were set by arson. We were talking about some that happened over in Europe.
Yes, and in the United States as well. Actually, I think wasn't there a story a couple of years ago? There were some fires in Ontario, like southern Ontario.
A few years ago, yeah,
those were arson, I believe.
A few years ago, some of the fires were arson, but I haven't heard anything about that this year.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on. This next story we have here, I quite make the question: are rolling blackouts coming? This is a little bit related to the story we just covered on the heat pumps being regulated in the UK. This story comes from Reuters. Headline is Grid Operator in U.S. Central States Warns of Potential Rolling Blackouts. I'll read a little bit here. The regional U.S. grid operator for 14 central states warned on Monday evening that it could order rolling blackouts because the power system was on the brink of an electricity shortfall due to record demand. Several power plants unexpectedly tripped offline, leaving reserve margins razor thin amid a heat wave in the territory stretching from North Dakota to Louisiana. The pool, called the Southwest Power Pool, SPP, issued a level 3 energy alert, meaning the grid operator used some or all of its operating reserves to serve demand. The grid operator said it had not had to order rolling blackouts despite the high risk, but apparently it was pretty close. Now, a friend of the show, Steve Malloy of junkscience.com, said that this result was because of foolish over-reliance on wind power. And in related news, there actually was a rolling blackout in New York City. Did you guys hear about it? Because I didn't. Our friend Francis Menton over at Manhattan Contrarian has the story. I'll read a little bit from that. The headline is Rolling Blackouts Hit New York. At least since New York passed its Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act back in 2019, it has been clear that trouble has been coming for New York's electrical grid. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act effectively prohibits construction of new fossil fuel plants, even natural gas plants, and the old ones are aging and are forbidden to be replaced or upgraded. Supposedly, lots of wind and solar generators were going to be added to the system. but those have been slow to come and, more importantly, can't be counted on to generate anything when you need them. So I think it's important to report that on this past July 2nd and 3rd, Con Edison ran out of options and imposed rolling blackouts in parts of the North Bronx and southern Westchester County. You haven't heard about this? It's another example of the legacy media burying an inconvenient story. Checking to see what the New York Times has to say about these blackouts, I found just one sentence in the 6th paragraph of a July 3rd article that is otherwise reporting on the heat wave that hit last weekend. That'll be enough for that. For background, Linnea, part of the reason this show exists is to highlight junk science about human CO2 emissions causing a climate catastrophe, which leads to bad policy that is actually harmful to human health. Any rolling blackouts in America are attributable to bad policy and are entirely preventable. That's what I think.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. So as in our intro, actually, Andy made this good point several years ago on this show, that all of the buildup of renewables for the last couple of years. Yep, there you are, Andy. All the renewable buildup over, I don't know, the kind of peak of the renewables frenzy was replacing stuff that they shut down for the most part. It was getting us to the same point that we were already at. It was not accounting for increases in most places in electricity demand. And at the same time as they were pushing this stuff, pushing for intermittence, promising that the battery backup would be there eventually, even though it is not there. At the same time, they were also pushing for mass electrification of homes and appliances and your vehicles. So electricity demand is rising, and it has been rising. The degrowth agenda is dead in the water because of AI. Thankfully, that's something that all of us should be grateful for when it comes to the AI revolution. It is promoting and accelerating an energy abundance agenda from the same people who were pushing net zero just a few years ago. So that, obviously they're cynical, cynical bastards to be flipping so quickly as soon as something that makes them money comes on the table that demands extra energy. However, this is something we can take advantage of. And the advantage that we need to take is insisting on investment in energy infrastructure. We need more power stations. We need more transmission infrastructure, which people have historically been against in many areas, especially in the Northeast. We need natural gas pipelines in the Northeast, especially. Across the board, we need more energy sources themselves on the grid than we have now. Regardless of the AI stuff, electricity demand is just going to keep increasing. So it is a very good thing that we're seeing people kind of wake up to this and they're not just closing their eyes and kind of kicking the can down the road like they have for a long time. There's only so far that you can continue to kick the can down the road before it comes back to bite you. That's been a major thing. I talked on a different podcast last week that one of the major issues that we've seen in the natural gas sector is they've been kind of forced because of protests against natural gas pipelines in general to continue kind of patching the current natural gas infrastructure that we have instead of replacing stuff with updated materials. And that's been a problem. And it's been a danger of leaks. It's been a danger of, the leak is probably about the worst thing that can happen with that because one, you're losing product, so the cost goes up, and two, it can be very dangerous because, of course, natural gas is flammable. But all of this infrastructure that's been blocked for so long by the left, they're just going to get ignored, I think, going forward. And so, yeah, the rolling blackouts have not quite made the news as much this year. It's quite interesting. There was also a rolling blackout situation in some of the neighborhoods surrounding within just like an hour train ride of downtown DC. And those, as far as I saw, did not make any major news, and yet they had major blackouts during peak heat wave during the July 4th week. So it was, once again, it is a self-inflicted problem. We don't have the infrastructure that we need. We don't have the energy production capacity that we need. And it's only going to get worse if we don't fix it. In fact, and I'm not the only one saying, like, it's not just us, random Heartland people saying this kind of thing, right? Like, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has been screaming about this for almost a decade at this point. These are federal regulators, so you would imagine that they would not be the best of the best. So, but from Heartland's perspective, but even they have been saying, and they've had some very good commissioners who have said, we need to stop trying to just replace coal plants with wind and solar and start actually building more capacity. Then we're taking off of the grid, which is a crazy concept, apparently. But yeah, no, it's been a long time coming. If we don't get this stuff fixed now while the opportunity exists and while the public support in some areas exists, then we're going to be toast.
In just the past few weeks, two of the large regional transmission organizations, as far as I'm concerned, these are scams set up by the federal government, but they have warned that there is insufficient reliable baseload dispatchable power. And there's strong evidence that had the Trump administration not stepped in and kept a number of coal plants online that were slated for closure during what they called it an energy emergency, and they're keeping it online 90 days at a time, but they keep rolling over the 90 days, that there would have been more brownouts, blackouts. The blackouts, some of these rolling blackouts are sort of planned things. Why are they planned? To stop the grid from collapsing entirely. And Linnea pointed out that, energy demand is growing. But for more than a decade, just a few years ago, energy demand was flat in the U.S. Electricity demand was flat in the U.S., hadn't been growing. Despite that fact, the energy supply was falling and the costs of energy were rising. No new demand, no rising demand. Costs keep going up and reliability keeps going down. Blackouts, brownouts, failures. What did that correspond with? No new demand. Taking coal plants offline, taking some nuclear plants offline, fighting over natural gas, and adding tremendous amounts of wind and solar. Technically, if you look at baseload capacity, if you look at nameplate capacity, I think you'd find we have far more electric power based on nameplate capacity than we had a decade ago. Yet prices are higher, reliability is lower. That's because you have to add a lot of wind and a lot of solar to meet even the demand of a small coal or nuclear power plant, right? Because you have to plan for all the times they're going to be off. So you've got to generate it. And it's not just natural gas that catches fire. You know what also catches fire and is hard to put out and dangerous? Battery backup plants.
Yeah. And Sterling, real quick, just for the sake of our audience who, we have a lot of audience members who are very savvy on these issues. But we probably also have some audience members who don't know these fancy jargon terms that we're using. Nameplate capacity is the kind of idealized production that a electricity generating plant can produce. No plant, not thermal plants like coal and gas and stuff, no plant generates its nameplate capacity. They all are they lose some to inefficiencies. The difference is the inefficiencies for something like a wind or solar are, much, much lower. The actual electricity generated by these sources is a lot lower than their nameplate capacity as compared to something like an always on coal plant or gas plant. Sometimes you'll see in the media, they'll try to claim that natural gas has or can have just as low of a actual generating, like electricity generating capacity compared to its nameplate as wind or solar. But it's a sneaky thing that they're doing where they're conflating peaker plants, which are natural gas plants that are only turned on in like emergency or to cover that, when wind stops blowing and you get that dip in output from wind, they'll turn on a peaker plant to make up the difference. Those obviously are operating at low efficiency because they're turning them off and on. And so sometimes in the media, you'll see them try to conflate those and they won't say it. I think probably because the reporters don't know what they're talking about. Like they don't know that there is a difference. But yeah, so just for our audience members who might not know what we're talking about when we use terms like that, that is what that is.
I just looked it up while you were explaining that. And so we haven't had a new coal plant come online in the last decade. So 2013, we have grown 360 gigawatts of nameplate capacity, almost all on the backs of wind and solar. Yet our grid is less reliable, our power system is less reliable, and it's more expensive. So they can't say wind and solar are cheaper, and they also can't say it makes up for the reliability. It's just as safe.
Yeah, and someone just commented, Alex Pope commented, I think multiple nuclear and or fossil fuel plants could produce above nameplate. No.
Nuclear do. No.
Yeah.
Nuclear, there are some nuclear plants that are now producing 3 and 4% more than their nameplate capacity just through efficiency upgrades that they've made.
Right, but once you accommodate the efficiency upgrade, then your nameplate capacity changes for the plant. So if it's like, if you're basing that off of its old nameplate capacity before you did the upgrade, then yeah, it's producing above. But definitionally, nameplate is the idealized energy production for the system. So I don't know. I think that's a definitional quibble that I would fight over a little bit.
You guys are such nerds. This is on energy. Oh my God.
I'm learning. I'm learning. And every day is a school day.
We are all learning it. We are all learning it.
You think that's nerdy? Look what I found. Remember, we've gone full circle on energy in the United States. We used to have a program that was put on called Ready Kilowatt, and even had comic books about it. The progress of the light bulb, 75 years. The mighty atom is now fueling America's progress. Just plug it in. I'm ready kilowatt. They actually had tokens you could get at the electric company, coins, Ready Kilowatt, cartoons, all kinds of stuff. They promoted Ready Kilowatt for a long, long time. But then, guess what happened? Remember, kids, electricity will kill you. Well, right now, today, the way things are happening, it's the lack of electricity that will kill you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like the fact that the electricity jumped out of the wall and is about to shiv this kid.
Yeah. Well,
boy, that escalated quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think this is, that propaganda campaign.
Did you just make a joke about a kid being electrocuted?
They did. It's hilarious.
Wow. And you say that us Brits are dark. Jesus.
Who hasn't?
Well, he was a bad kid. To be fair, he was a bad kid.
That's okay. That makes it
you could just tell. You could just tell by looking at him. You could just.
Yeah.
You serious?
Yeah. Well, Lois, to put a capper on this, that I was going to say that propaganda, one of the images there just showed it makes people think electricity. Where does electricity come from? Oh, it comes from the socket in the wall. That's where electricity comes from.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
electricity does not come from that. And actually electricity needs to come. I think I mentioned this on last week's program. It's so very frustrating because in any other industry, you develop a surplus because you anticipate growth, or you would think to do so. Energy seems to be the only resource, and it's a very important resource, in which we are creating artificial scarcity. With the AI revolution and the increasing power demands just on a growing population, but then you add in AI and data centers, we should be right now 15% above what we need in both the United States and in the UK, just based on the AI revolution and data centers that are necessary. And instead, we are doing things like the UK wants to do for you all over there, and to start shutting, you have smart heat pumps, and then they must connect it to the internet. And we're going to have rolling blackouts here in the US, which are involuntary, and then your voluntary shutdowns in the UK. It's complete madness. I'm waiting for one politician on either side of the Atlantic to have a clear vision about having an energy surplus for the people of their countries. And we don't have it quite yet here in the US, although Trump is pretty good on that issue. And you guys seem to be at least a decade away from anybody being able to implement
not necessarily.
a policy.
We might only be an hour away if you draft me something and I put it under the right person's nose.
Let's
talk. No, honestly, joking aside, if the Heartland guys in the US can help me put something together that I can put in front of the right people, then maybe, who knows, you might see a very prominent politician who might have a policy on it.
All right, I have it for you right now. Do you have a pen and paper?
You're joking, yeah?
drill, baby, drill. That's it.
I've got this pen and paper that my ex-husband bought me as part of my birthday package of presents. I know I am spoiled, with a little crucifix on it. So I will write everything down, and it will be, endorsed by our Lord. So let's do that later on.
I read a book once that was called, what was it called? It was a science fiction book, and it was about a space colony that the people wanted to come back to Earth, but the Earth had been shut down by the Greens, basically.
Right. Okay.
And so all the power plants had ivy and vines growing over them. They were these monuments to industrialization that we all knew was evil. There's going to be someday in the future, if we don't really change course, and look, Trump's doing all he can, but it takes more than what Trump is doing to get us on the right path. And if we don't really change course, there's going to be a time in the future when people will say, how did they have all that energy before? And the people will tell them, oh, well, that's impossible. That's impossible today. There were so few people, or whatever they're going to claim, as opposed to it's a matter of engineering. We engineered it. We had a grid designed by engineers, not politicians, and it worked. And you could have.
Well, if the Malthusians get their way, there'll be a much smaller population in the future, and we all know that this whole green agenda is, at the very least, to do with cutting the amount of people on the planet, as well as installing extreme left-wing ideology. So yeah, I don't know.
I thought that since we were talking about, this kid jumping out of the electricity, jumping out of the wall and hurting this kid, I thought we would end with this, because it's really kind of a good capstone on everything we've talked about. Plugging a fork into the wall socket.
That's not that bright, is it? Excuse the pun.
Not that bright, but yeah, electricity can kill you. So can socialism.
100%. All right. Let's get to our last item real quick here. Well, not real quick. We'll take the time needed. Just as Godzilla hates Japanese cities, typhoons hate solar power. This comes to us from our friend Joe Nova. Typhoon Bavi strikes solar parks in China, giving a new meaning to distributed energy. Typhoon Bavi traveled right through a zone of multiple coastal solar parks in Zhejiang, China on July 12th. It's difficult to confirm details as there are few news reports, and the CCP don't seem to want to put out a press release. But we know Typhoon Bavi made landfall in Zhejiang in eastern China near Taiwan, and Google satellite shots show quite a few large solar panel installations were right there in the water and on the tidal flats where the typhoon hit. These sitting ducks of glass had no protection. Some hybrid solar farms double as fish farms too. The largest one, called the 550 megawatt Tihan Fishing Solar Hybrid Project, had 1.4 million solar PV panels covering 4.7 square kilometers. Wow. It was finished in December of 2021. Another one, the The Hengtai 550 megawatt fishery and photovoltaic farm was only connected up to July 30th, was only connected up on July 30th last year. It cost 1.47 billion won, or about $200 million in US funds. It was not even a year before it faced its first super typhoon. It was a baby. Presumably, all these farms would have been expected to last 25 years or so, not 1 to 3 years. In fact, we have a video here to look at the damage from last week. This is a report from China Observer on YouTube. Let's roll that.
On July 13th, after Typhoon Bobby passed through China, many photovoltaic facilities along the coast of Zhejiang suffered damage. There were flipped over solar panels and damaged support structures. Among them, a major offshore solar project in Wenzhou suffered widespread damage. It had a total investment of about 11 billion yuan. Videos from the site showed the area left in complete disarray. Earlier, on the night of July 11th, Typhoon Bobby made landfall in Zhejiang, bringing with it strong winds and heavy rain. Videos from the scene showed severe flooding in some factory areas, with floodwaters carrying debris into buildings. Some power distribution equipment on utility poles flashed and started smoking. Due to the strong winds, rainwater continued pouring into residential buildings. Some windows and doors were damaged, and mist filled the hallways. Of course, damage to ordinary civilian facilities during a typhoon is not unusual. But when a large-scale offshore solar project, specifically built in the open sea, is damaged by a typhoon, that is a much more serious issue.
Sterling, as Jim Croce sang, you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit in the wind, you don't take the mask off that old Lone Ranger, and you don't mess around with Jim. And you also don't put solar installations offshore of typhoon country.
Yeah, or as far as I'm concerned, anywhere else. This is not the first time it happened. In 2024, the largest offshore floating wind farm in the world in India, it was in India at the time. It was in India at the time, I'd like to stress, got hit by a monsoon. Now, monsoons never hit India. It's unheard of for India to have a monsoon. It destroyed the wind farm. Just a few years in operation, just like these Chinese ones. Now, the Chinese ones, they said, were designed to withstand large-scale major typhoons. They didn't do much of a good job. What may seem workable on a computer or in a lab doesn't test out well, evidently, in real life when a monsoon hits. It's too chaotic. They can't plan for the chaos and the winds of a monsoon. And so these wind farms have destroyed, hundreds of millions of dollars wasted, energy offline. But let's talk about one other thing that not many people talk about. Floating wind farms. They are combined in China with aquaculture, shrimp and crabs. They have facilities underneath these wind farms. Not wind farms, solar farms. And so a lot of the world gets its shrimp and crab and other fish from China, from aquaculture facilities. All that polysilicon is now, the metals, the toxic minerals that are contained in them are now in the fish ponds. I'm not eating any seafood that comes from China for the foreseeable future. If I ever did, I'd try to check that kind of thing. But because I don't want little bits of polysilicon getting into my, it gets into the intestines of the shrimp and no one knows it. I don't want the cadmium and other dangerous minerals. It is madness to do something like this, just to proclaim, because what they do is they set this up and they go out and they say, look at how green we are. Look at how wonderful we are on the cutting edge of technology. In fact, environmentalists think this is the cutting edge of technology. Dual use solar farms. We're getting the fish and we're getting the power. One typhoon comes in a year, 2 years after they're constructed, wrecks the lot. And you have to know this is going to happen. It's not a mystery. In India, monsoons come every year. Some years are worse than others, but they have a whole season called monsoon season for a reason. They have typhoons in China every year. So we can't pretend that we don't know this could happen and the potential dangers of it. So I just think this is an idiotic government planned catastrophe of the highest order.
But look on the bright side. Look on the bright side, Sterling. Solar sushi, right?
That's China, though. Notice how crappy these installations look, though, compared to ones that are built in the United States. Yeah. Did you notice the first video of them blowing all over the place? The things were on wheels, on wheels on the coast. They do it as cheap as they possibly can. Of course. It's utter garbage. These ones look okay, but I don't know where this is.
Some of those pictures they showed the frame that the polysilicon panels go in, and they just showed entire strips of polysilicon panels being ripped up like you're pulling tape up.
Yeah. No, that's
and flying through the air like 1,000 daggers. I mean, holy shit.
And then even if they look whole, little shards of polysilicon is now floating or sinking.
Linnea, do you think that that this is because, you're talking about China and the fact that if this was a private enterprise or even a private enterprise that was heavily subsidized through the taxpayer in whichever country it was, there would have to be a due diligence so that they could get certain types of insurance and things like that, which of course this kind of infrastructure would never jump through the hoops, would it? So the fact that it is the country that it is with the political system that it has, this is why it's been so shoddily done, because it sort of doesn't matter, does it? If it doesn't work, they'll just rebuild it or whatever, or do something else. It's when you don't have capitalism, you get this, don't you? You get shoddiness.
It's not just that it's shoddily done because it was communist. It's that it was done on that scale in conjunction with fish farming at all. I do not believe that this could get licensed in the U.S.
No,
or even the UK,
or funded. Even the UK, funded, because who's going to fund it? Who's going to fund something like that?
As we are,
Jerry Palmer makes a good point here. He goes, "Linnea, they need to make them mobile so that they're easy to get rid of when the cameras have left." I think that's probably true. I heard, I don't know if this was true or not, because sometimes people say stuff about China that I'm like, I believe China does a lot of crazy stuff, but sometimes I'm not entirely sure that what you hear is accurate. But this I kind of believe. Supposedly they were getting binged by the United Nations or something for deforestation issues. And so what they did was, because the United Nations doesn't do like on the ground surveys of this stuff, they just look at greening from satellite data for that kind of thing. China went and just painted a bunch of like open rocky ground green, so that when the
you've got to admire their ingenuity.
So that when the photographs were analyzed at a very like brief, broad kind of level, China would pass the like lack of deforestation things or something. That sounds like something China would do. So I don't know if that was true or not, but I did read something about that once. And this kind of the solar panel thing reminds me of that. People are always talking about how, China is so far ahead with their renewables. They're doing such a good job. They're proving that you can run an economy off of renewables, blah, blah. They're not. It's so absurd to believe China when they say that they're doing that, when they're the ones, they're basically just using all of this stuff as like big marketing for the West, right? They have
inconceivable. You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Thank you, Inigo, but that is for that's for the word unprecedented for me. But but the Chinese are using these big installations not because they're actually getting a whole lot of work out of them. They put them up cheaply and fast in order to show them off to the West, so that the West will buy into the green scam, which China makes tons of money off of. Between the rare earth mineral issue and the actual like solar panel and chip construction and stuff, China has a corner on the green market. It's something to be aware of and take a grain of salt when you hear them say stuff like, look at these incredible feats of engineering that China is doing. Most of the time it's something of a paper mache construction there.
And
Yeah,
then simultaneously, they're doing what the Russians did. While they're touting their green credentials, they're undermining energy development in the West, particularly in the U.S. They don't want us to develop fossil fuels. They want us to be more dependent upon them. It's been for some time now, environmentalists have lauded China despite it being the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. They said, the good thing about China is they can get things done rapidly. You don't have all these nasty democracy and people complaining, being able to stand in the way and lawsuits. Well, yeah, China gets things done. They built these floating wind farms in record time, and they were destroyed in record time as well.
Yeah, that's the thing that's kind of crazy about this, though, right? Is that the same people who laud China for being able to get stuff done just ignores the fact that the reason why China is able to get stuff done, other than like slave labor and not paying people wages and all sorts of, labor violations, they also don't have an OSHA. Right. They don't have a federal bureaucracy that insists on checking every single step of your engineering process. They're not getting on the phone. If they're drilling wells in China, which I'm sure they are, but I don't know, I'm not super familiar with East Asian oil and gas companies. I guarantee that the CCP does not insist that they call them every step of the well, like our regulatory agencies do, to make sure that they're allowed to proceed. They're not doing that. They don't have safety measures in place. You've seen, videos have gone around online that show enough of that for sure. So
those two wind farms that they showed, I think that we said they were 500 megawatts apiece, or one of them might have been 350 megawatts, something like that. So less than a gigawatt. Last year, China added 90 gigawatts of coal.
Yeah. I think we can refer to these as Timu Potemkin energy villages, because that's what they are. And as you guys saw in this last item, you can't count on solar and wind installations to survive a natural disaster. They're just not up to the task. Yeah. But there is something you can count on to survive an economic disaster, something that is up to the task, and that is an investment in precious metals, which you can do right now, today, with our sponsor, Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows, and this here very show, you hear pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. There are so many other companies out there that can do that for you, but this is why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals. And it's the man who runs the company, and his name is Ira Brashatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He doesn't employ high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys like many in big gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in high-quality bullion. And that is so much better when it comes time for you to liquidate that valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you're going to have that investment delivered directly to your home and very discreetly. Also want to remind everyone that Ira is advertising on our program because he's a fan of this program and the messages that we communicate. He's also an America First patriot, and I'm sure he loves the UK freedom fighters as well. He does not donate to Democrats or other leftists. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party and those silly solar farms. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of the World Economic Forum and Red Ed Miliband. We are so proud to have Advisor Metals as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio or back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals that can survive economic disasters, go right now to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will make the whole process so very easy for you. So many of our viewers have already done this, and you can join them at climaterealismshow.com/metals, and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us while you're helping your financial future. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter, and any compliments I got for my segue, which is wasn't bad, came to me. But
That was
now
pretty
it's time.
impressive.
I think it was great. I thought
Very
it was
smooth.
good.
Very
The
smooth.
endorsement of Linnea and Lois is what I was looking for. Speaking of
Hey.
Linnea, it's your turn to take over the show for Q&A. Take it away, Linnea.
Try to get in yelling at my dog to hush in between that transition there, and she just ignored me, so that's good. Anyway, all right. So we've got a couple of questions here from our audience. We're going to try to keep it on time today for the show, but let's see. All right, we have a couple questions for Lois. This question from Mr. Johansson says, Lois, didn't the government decide to drill more in the North Sea?
Well, as with everything that comes out of this Labour government, everything's very ambiguous. So Ed Miliband announced that he was open to drilling or to giving new contracts out for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. But then we never heard any more about it. Then the new Energy and Net Zero Secretary, that's sort of a little bit loaded, isn't it? That it's the Net Zero Secretary. She has said that we need to be thoughtful and sort of, realpolitik about exploration in the North Sea. So who knows is the answer. I know for a fact that both the Conservatives, if they were to win power, which they won't, and Reform UK, hopefully, if they do win power, will have both said that drilling in the North Sea is a massive priority for both parties in terms of, our energy supply. That, and both parties have said that they want to frack as well. So yeah, the answer is not even I know, and I'm pretty informed on this stuff, what the current position is. It's just all a bit of bluff, and they're just doing what China's telling them to do. So, which is to not produce any of our own energy. So there you go.
Anthony, this one's for you from Above Us Only Sky. This is a very Anthony thing that Above Us Only Sky has said, which is, do typhoons cause floating blackouts?
Wow.
Well, they do cause lots of floaties, that's for sure. But I don't know about floating blackouts. Yeah, I guess you can say they do. When you look at the solar panel, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let's see. Okay, over there in the UK, Chris asks, have they started telling people it's selfish to heat your home to a comfortable level like they just did with AC and cooling?
Yep. You've been seeing it in California now for 5 or 6 years.
It's for Lois.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's relevant on both sides of the pond, but yeah, we've been told that it's all part of us being good. We're subjects, not citizens like you, but us being good people that we should be going without. And so yes, we have been told things like this. And that plays into the whole thing that I've mentioned quite a number of times when I've come on your fantastic program. And that's about the religious, but medieval status, religious style of this net zero cultism, which is about denial, hair shirt, the god of net zero, and all of those kind of things. And of course, being freezing cold would be absolutely fantastic for these people that this hair shirt fanatical Greta Thunberg loving group. So yeah. So the answer to the question, the short answer to the question is yes.
Boy, I wish I was, giving up as much as Greta Thunberg was, going on a yacht across the Atlantic.
Well, she hasn't been giving up food.
No.
All right. Let's see. Okay, Bo Gus says, I saw a YouTube video last night about sodium batteries that could replace lithium. 1, if it's a sodium metal, wouldn't that have the same exploding problem as lithium? And 2, is sodium less rare than lithium? Well, lithium isn't very rare either, so I don't think so. Anthony, do you have any input on this?
Well, there is some talk about that technology, but I don't think it's quite mature yet. The battery technology, they keep forking out in all kinds of different ways. I've seen, what interestingly enough, the old batteries that came with the Detroit electric car, I think it was like 1919 that thing happened. Those batteries are still viable today. They were an iron something combination battery, and those are actually quite reliable, although they're not quite as heavy as lead, but they're quite interesting. But there's yet to be an emerging battery technology that's good enough to replace lithium. Lithium has all of its drawbacks. Of course, it tends to have an explosive nature. But I'm really hoping that, either sodium will come through or one of these other technologies will come through, and we'll actually have some decent battery capacity. The biggest problem with battery capacity is that in terms of volume and energy capacity, gasoline is still way much more energy rich than a battery is.
Yeah.
I think that there's a variety of burgeoning battery technologies. I think there's one called, let me see, what was it called? Silicon anode design, solid state batteries. There are some that are coming from different kinds of chemicals. They haven't matched. In the lab, they say they're better than lithium ion, but they haven't matched them, produce commercial scale. I'm not sure whether sodium is as flammable as lithium.
It's very flammable with water.
But I believe it is less rare. There's a lot of sodium on the earth. You have sodium mines, large mines, not you have to tease through the little bits of stuff to get it out. No, large chunks of sodium. So I think it's more plentiful, but I'm not sure it's less flammable. And I'm not sure that that's going to win up in the marketplace. Look, lithium ion got into the marketplace because there was a push for rechargeable batteries for small devices. And then it spread to automobiles. I'm not sure these others. There'll be something that replaces lithium sometime in the future. I'm not sure it's even been designed or discovered yet, but there are competitors out there being brought into production.
Yeah, and I will point out that sodium is less explosive than lithium. Lithium is higher on the periodic table. It has more reactivity. And so it tends to go boom much easier. But sodium also does. It just depends on how it's combined. I mean, sodium nitrate, table site, is extremely stable. You never see salt shakers explode in restaurants. So,
not usually.
Could turn out to be something great.
I think you meant sodium chloride.
Sorry.
Sodium nitrate might.
You're right. Sodium chloride. I'm thinking sodium
might not be
nitrate
the one you
because
wanted to put on.
I
your
wonder
food.
what sodium nitrate tastes like on chips with vinegar.
It's salty. All right.
Linnea using her degree there. Excellent.
Okay, so let's see. What have we got here? This is a good one for Sterling. The money and subsidy is what holds a lot of it being renewables together. What would happen if they had to stand on their own merits tomorrow?
You would see you'd see wind factories shut down. You'd see solar factories shut down. You'd see battery factories shut down. You'd see no new construction, only construction that was already underway because of the subsidies that existed and that they get to continue to take for the next 10 years would get built. We have experienced this in the past. So initially the subsidies, specifically the production tax credit for wind and solar, were time limited. And when their subsidies ran out, as they have done, I think 3, but maybe 5 occasions in budget bills, until they passed an omnibus that threw it back in, that renewed it, the factory shut down the next day because the people who operate those weren't willing to lose money on something they couldn't be sure they're going to get their federal largesse for. There are places where wind and solar make sense, even in today's environment without subsidies. Isolated locations like a ranch in parts of Montana that don't have ready access to the electric grid. And running power lines is not cheap. So it would make more sense for some place like that. Out in the wilds of Alaska, it'd make more sense to have a solar battery, to have a wind turbine, to have, along with a diesel generator, to have regular power.
Yeah.
They're trying to get the electric company to rig the line to your place. But those are few and far between. Most of us don't live in those isolated locations.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to be said for an energy source that doesn't require a fuel that you have to store on site. The battery kind of counts as a little bit of that, but it's a post-production fuel for your actual house and stuff. But yeah, we'll see.
I'll just add real quick to that. We already know what would happen if subsidies ran out, because several automakers in the United States had announced plans for big billion-dollar investments in vehicle batteries that completely dried up and went away. I know of at least 3 of them. The factory plans just dissolved as soon as the subsidy went away.
2 car companies said we will no longer make a V8 engine. Some going to all battery. Well, guess what? V8s are back on the drawing table at GM and Stellantis.
Yeah. The great thing about that, when you compare electrical, you get an electric car and then you realize, wow, I could have had a V8.
I maintain, that
where's the rim
Cybertruck would be
shot?
so cool if it came in diesel.
I mean, where's the rim shot? That was perfect.
Well, all the electric car owners.
Late but accepted.
Yeah, you guys.
All of the electric car owners in England who thought that they were being ever so clever by getting this electric car. Number one, they're all subject to the congestion charge now. But number two, a lot of very smug people who could afford to charge their electric vehicle on their driveway are going to be subject to a tax that was announced a few days ago by our new Prime Minister, unelected, so there's going to be a tax, a per mile tax on people that have their own driveways. And of course, anyone who has an electric vehicle and charges it at home will have a driveway. So all of this smugness is sort of going out the window a little bit at the moment.
And I bet their chargers will be shut down during power outages to keep the grid operating. Like they will close down the charging stations.
Absolutely, because they've been good boys and girls. They'll be the ones that the turkey's voting for Christmas. Well, I told them, I've been telling them for 5 years what's going to happen. You can't. You can. What do they say? You can take the animal to water, but you can't make the animal drink. So what can I do? I'm doing my best.
It's probably going to drive you to drink one day, Lois. Like right now, that would be bad.
Yeah, I think that ship might have already sailed, Jim.
I would wager you didn't even need to be driven to that.
I don't know what you're talking about. I really don't. The rumors about all English people being highly functioning alcoholics are sadly completely true. Yeah.
We're being made fun of by Chris here. He says, and I want to point out there are different accents in the United States, but Chris says, very important question. If Americans pronounce turbine turbine, how do they pronounce turban?
Turban. It's probably the same, is it?
Yeah.
I've never pronounced turbine turban. I don't think. No. Some of us might. I think it's a regional.
I've driven him to drink now. I've driven you to drink.
They can all be turban. Who cares?
He may have put some vodka in there. I can't really attest to it though.
I've had one very small glass of champagne in nearly 2 hours. Now that there may be some sort of record set this evening. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I'm having a V8 right now for our friends across the pond. There used to be a TV campaign here called "Wow, I could have had a V8 instead of drinking soda," and so that's what that's all about.
Good for you.
All right. We have a question from Peter Halligan who says, "Is geothermal the answer to wind and solar?" No, I would say no. It actually has a worse situation than wind and solar when it comes to location. So the benefit of wind and solar is that you can put it in very remote areas that otherwise you can't get infrastructure to. Geothermal can almost only exist in very remote areas of, because people don't like to live on top of calderas very often. Geothermal is extremely location specific. You need to have a near surface magma chamber in order to economically drill to make a geothermal well. So what you do is you drill, you fracture the rock formation that you drilled into, and then you run some kind of fluid through it, usually some kind of water mixture, in order to generate steam to turn a turbine, because that's how all of our power plants works. We just love turning turbines. So if it works, it works. So but location suitability is very narrow for geothermal. You also, it's not just like, is there near surface water or near surface hot rock reservoir. You also have to know whether or not that hot rock reservoir, if you're going to use the water that's already there, is that water full of terrible junk like mercury and too much sulfur materials, stuff like that, because then that junk clogs up all of your mechanical equipment and stuff over time. It precipitates out, and so you can't have it in locations with too much of that junk. So it's very location specific. You can find out more about that if you look at the Heartland YouTube channel. I have a video about geothermal. I think there might even be 2 videos about geothermal that are up on our channel. One of them is older and goes into quite a bit more detail, and it's like 20 minutes long. But we also have a short one that's less than 5 minutes long, I believe. I think they're up. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think they're there.
We also have the energy at a glance documents on geothermal.
Yes. Yeah.
The benefits of geothermal is it can work 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
7 days a week where it makes sense. In some places, it makes sense. But not everywhere. Now they are bringing, just like with batteries, they're bringing new technologies online where they're doing, some of the fracking leaders are now doing deep drilling for geothermal in the hot rocks, but then you've got to get the fluid down to them and the fluid back up, and you've got the problems with, once again, the pipes clogging. So.
Yeah, it's complicated. I've said this probably every week on this show for all eternity. There is no magic bullet energy source. There's no one energy source that works flawlessly in all conditions. So it's, we're very fortunate to be able to live on a planet with so much availability for different energy sources. Places like Idaho make use of geothermal from, I believe they call it passive geothermal though. And Iceland does this too, where they run that hot water through the actual pipes of their homes and businesses or like greenhouses in order to warm them. Yeah. For passive heating. They'll put it under sidewalks on campus in Idaho at the college campuses to keep the ice off the sidewalks, that kind of thing. It's great. There are a lot of good utility for geothermal, but it is location specific. Alrighty. Let's go. Okay, I don't know the answer to this question. I don't even know how to begin to, but Kenneth asks, in Northern Virginia, we're fighting high power electric towers being installed. Why can't they bury them?
Well, one word, grounded. You put electrical underground. It works in some situations, but for high voltage, not so much. I mean, high voltage arcs tend to want to jump quite far, and that's why they're high up in the air. You put them underground, and you've got to have a huge amount of space around them, to keep arcing to ground from happening. And then if it should happen, then you've got yourself a real problem because the arcing is going to continue because it builds its own ionized pathway, and you're just going to keep having this electrical fire underground that's going to start building, and it's going to be a mess. So Moderate to low voltage cables can be underground. High voltage, big tower types, not so much.
But there's a reason why more moderate to low voltage cables aren't put underground while they're often strung above your head. And that's because it costs money to dig trenches and bury them underground.
Right.
It costs more money than just string them above your head. And utilities and governments usually don't like to do that. In addition, if they're underground, when there is a failure, once again, harder to fix.
Yep.
All right. We do have some more questions, but man, we've already gone over quite a bit. So I'm going to hand it back to Jim. So sorry if I didn't get to your questions. I will try to get to you next week, but thank you very much for submitting them. We have so much fun with our audience that it's hard to stop, but it's really fun to engage with you guys.
Yes, it's hard to stop, but at one point we do have to stop. And I want to thank everybody who participated in the chat today on both YouTube and Rumble, and increasingly on X. Thank you very much to the Heartland Institute's Anthony Watts, Sterling Burnett, and Linnea Lueken. And thanks again to our special guest today, the lovely Lois Perry from Heartland UK Europe. I want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFAC, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Thank you to our producers today, Andy Singer and Silas Pearson. And as I often like to mention, you can go to climaterealism.com to get daily, almost daily, counterspin to the nonsense you see in the mainstream media. You can go to climateataglance.com to arm yourself with all the facts you need to win any climate argument with any climate alarmist. Go to energyattaglance.com, where you can learn more about geothermal, which Linnea knows a lot about and has written about at energyattaglance.com. And as always, go to heartland.org, where you can learn more about this organization and how to support it going forward. Thanks again, everyone, for listening and watching, and we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.